Hunt with passion. Never stop casting. Chase the dream. Welcome to Season 3 of Musky Mastery Outdoors, sponsored by Joe Bucher Outdoors, #1 in big game fish products.
All right, guys, what is going on? And welcome back to another Musky Mastery vlog series here. And if this is your first time, please just soak all this in. These vlog series are informational. They're meant to be educational. They're meant to be as if you're stepping into the classroom once again as a student. I am your teacher, good old Mr. Martin here. And, it's not that I know everything, because I don't. And I'll be the first to tell you that I don't know everything. But I'm sharing with you what I have come to learn, through my years of, guiding, spending time on the water, spending time fishing with some amazing anglers, Hall of Fame anglers over the years, and what I've learned. And so that's really, what this vlog series is all about. It's all about that sitting down and let's get the pen and paper out, the notebook out, and let's learn together. Okay, I'm all about learning. And I believe this is the 12th vlog now in the Season 3 series. And this is part 2 of what I'm calling the Fall Transition and Musky Movement series. There's a lot of, old wives' tales, a lot of, misconceptions out there about fall fishing and what do muskies do, what do fish do when the water gets cold. Well, that's what we're trying to uncover in this 2-part vlog series on muskellunge movement and the fall period. But before we get started, because we got a lot of things to dive in on here as we start part 2, I want to give a special thank you to you. Yes, to you, sitting right there. If you're watching this, thank you so much for your support. We have just, for the first time ever, of course, well, it's the first time, we have surpassed 4,000 subscribers. It's an incredible number to me. I started with 0. I started with 1, and then it became 100 and 500, and 1,000 was a huge number, and 2,000 was a huge number, and subscriber number 3,001 was a big deal. But now that we've surpassed 4,000, that really is just it's a tribute to you. Without your support, I could have done very little of this. From my clients, my viewers and subscribers, to my friends and family, of course, my sponsors, Joe Bucher Outdoors, St. Croix Rods. Couldn't have done it without everybody, so thank you. So let's dive in. The goals for today's presentation, if you're just tuning in, if this is your first time viewing one of my vlogs, or if you didn't watch part 1, it was 40 minutes long, and I could have deterred you. I don't know what this one's going to be, but it's probably going to be something like that. Here's the goals. First of all, we're going to discuss musky movement now from what I'm calling kind of the early fall into what I'm calling the classic fall season, and then into late fall today. We're going to talk about musky movement in that time frame. And then within that, I want to try to discuss my tactics for catching fish during this time of year. What is my strategy? What are the lures I'm using? Am I using live bait? Yes or no? Yes, I am. We're going to talk about that today. So that's the goal. And I'm going to kind of just go back a little ways here into what I'm calling the early fall. Okay, we're going to call this early fall period. And I think it's really important, again, if you've read any of Tony Rizzo's books, Secrets of a Musky Guide, you see that he breaks it down by water temperature. There's a lot of great literature out there that breaks seasonal movements of fish down by water temperature. I know the Linder brothers have some books out there. I know Joe Bucher talks about water temperature, and Tom Gelb in his books. They're great books, but water temperature is a really important indicator of where we are throughout the course of a season. So my early fall period, I said that this was anywhere between, what did I say here? 59 to 57 degrees, okay? And this is right before turnover, and we're going to talk about turnover. And it's really kind of a unique time of the year that now we're actually moving, we're in the process of moving out of early fall into what I'm calling the classic fall bite. But what is happening during this time of, I call this great transition. there is great transition in this early fall period. Again, your days are, shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. You have less sunlight available for photosynthesis, and thus these weeds, not all of these weeds, okay? And a lot of what I talked about today, there's an asterisk here, okay? The asterisk is saying, look, these are generalities. These are not the be-all, end-alls. These are just things that I've noticed, okay? And what I have noticed is that during this time of the year, you generally will see a die-off to some degree. Not all of your weeds, so I will leave some weeds here, okay? But you start to see a die-off in a lot of that weed growth, okay? And I think to a certain extent, during this time, it's very tumultuous, right? We're going to talk about this period. These weeds of sorts, they tend to kind of start to decay. They lose their vigor. And it's during that time that I think everything's on the table as far as a pattern. When you've got that, high 50s to upper 50s water temperature, your weed bite is amazing up until those weeds start to deteriorate and they start to kind of fall apart. I guess I should say this. Your areas on the water where you have, see if I can move you, Mr. Muskie, a couple of these muskies, we'll move them over. The areas that you have remaining super strong weed growth, I think I talked about this in the last video, these become your magnet areas. These are areas that I am really keying in on. Areas that keep their weed growth, okay? As other areas kind of lose their luster, they lose their ability to hold massive quantities of bait fish, muskies will start to move in and use these areas more frequently, okay? So again, if there were weeds up here, I tend to think that muskies will migrate toward areas of, higher productivity for them. You think about them as a hunter, right? I mean, put it in terms of us humans, right? If a certain area of town, let's say the Walmart Supercenter went out of business and they had no more food there, and this is just, again, a very hypothetical situation. You might see more people migrating toward a different part of town where there's more food availability. I think the same goes with regard to muskies. And, as we see weed development start to shrink off during this time period, I talked about this in the last vlog, that you see muskies move into areas of current. Again, why? Well, again, I think, you look at these predators and they're so efficient. They're so good at dialing in, where can I find a meal the easiest way possible with expending the least amount of energy. I'm going to go to areas where I've got the most amount of cover, and I'm going to go to areas where I've got current. I'm not saying that muskies don't use current all throughout the year, because they do, but I'm talking about when it is this time period, what am I focusing on? Focusing on current. I'm focusing on areas that still have really strong weed development, okay? And by the way, just as these red marks are supposed to be logs, these hashtags are fish cribs, so just so you get the general gist. And here in our scenario, we've got, again, a flowage of sorts. We've got a small lake, a much larger lake, and then you can see we move out into another larger lake. So again, I'll just wrap this whole early fall period up where, again, I'm looking to really cover water at this time of year. So if you're moving in, if you're still in this early fall period, if you're in southern Wisconsin or southern Minnesota or Iowa or Michigan or Illinois or wherever you might be fishing, I'm looking to really cover water quickly, efficiently. I'm trying, because again, and I'm trying again with that in mind, I'm trying to key in on areas that I think are going to be musky magnets. And that's really one of the coolest parts. It's kind of like the season reverses itself, so to speak. Think about this for a second. In the early part of the season, where we have areas of super thick weed growth, that's where your muskies are going to be, where a lot of other areas on these lakes don't have the development yet. That's why a lot of us spend our time seeking out bodies of water that have superior development in comparison to other lakes that don't have that great development, okay? Because it's easier to find muskies. As the season progresses and you start ending the season, you start going toward the bitter end here, at least in the the northern states here like Wisconsin, where I do most of my fishing in Canada, The same process starts to happen again, where you have fish clustered around areas where you have good weed growth. So it's the same thing that happened in late May and early June, kind of starts to happen again in this late September, early October phase, okay? But then things get really weird. And I don't want to erase my entire drawing here, so I'm going to keep it here, okay? But we then go into it, and not all lakes turn over. We should kind of talk about this thing. There's a lot of misunderstanding about, do all lakes turn over? What is turnover? How does that affect my fishing and such? Now, without getting into because we could spend an entire vlog, and if you want to see that, just write that in the comments down below. We could spend an entire vlog on turnover and what's happening scientifically in a lake. But as we I'll kind of rewrite my board here as we move into the classic fall period, okay, which I'm gonna rewrite this here, okay, as classic fall. And again, thank you to my good friend John, who supplied me with these amazing magnets. But as we turn into the classic fall period, and I have deemed this anywhere from 56 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit surface temperatures. As we move into this, many of our lakes experience turnover. What, in a nutshell, is turnover? Well, here's what kind of happens, okay? First of all, lakes that stratify tend to be at least 35 feet deep, generally speaking. Current can sometimes take this stratification away on some smaller waters. We'll talk about that. Now, I shouldn't say take it away, but it makes the actual true process of stratification a little bit more challenging to figure out. It's more complex. But generally speaking, during the late spring and into early summer, the water will do what we call stratify, okay? Which means you have essentially 3 layers, okay? On the top layer here, we call this top layer of water is called the and I have to remember how to say this. It's the epilimnion, okay? The epilimnion. Okay? And that's the top layer. It's a tongue twister, epilimnion, okay? And this is the least dense. This is the warmest. This is the warmest water. Water is a really neat molecule because actually as it warms, it becomes less dense, and as it cools, it becomes more dense. But then as it cools further and gets closer to becoming a solid, it actually becomes less dense again. Otherwise, all life as we know it wouldn't exist, okay? Because if solid ice was more dense than liquid, we wouldn't, there would be no more muskies because the ice would sink down and kill everything below it. So this is the epilimnion, and then we have what we call in the middle here, we call the thermocline, okay? And then on the bottom we have this cooler hypolimnion. And does it really matter what these scientific terms are? Not really. This is the colder water, okay? And what happens here is let me see if I have a cold color here, dark purple, is winds cool our water here, okay? Cool our surface temperature. This water starts to become more dense. The warm water on the surface starts to fall, okay? And it mixes with these colder waters. Thermocline is just kind of this like barrier between them where you've got really rapid temperature change here in the thermocline. And we have this mixing, okay? We have this mixing of waters during turnover, and this can make fishing during turnover pretty challenging. Again, I remember the great Steve Herbeck, just keep casting. And if you can't figure out where they are, just keep casting. I don't want to actually quote Steve on that because he'll say I never said that, but he said something to that extent at a seminar many, many years ago, in that, during this process of dramatic change, just go out there and pound it, as we say. Just go pound the water. After turnover is complete, we generally have a much more uniform, you won't have stratification anymore if a true turnover has taken place, okay? And again, I would, you know, welcome any biologists or ecologists to come on, you know, the show here at some point, and we can talk science. But after turnover is complete, we have a much more uniform meaning that from top to bottom, the water temperature has more consistency. I'm not saying that on the bottom that it's not colder than it is on the top. It definitely is a little cooler on the bottom. But there's certainly a more uniform temperature. There's less variance, okay? And that can be really good for us in the fall. But I think during this time, once this happens, okay, this is the big thing that I want to talk about here. I'm calling this, I have it in my notes, discuss the big move. And this is what I think, okay? I think that once temperatures drop into that mid-50 range, I think, now this is not all muskies. This is not all muskies. It certainly is not. But I think that we have a migration of sorts from smaller lakes into larger, deeper holding areas, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and call these wintering areas, okay? Wintering areas. Now, I'm not suggesting that muskies are suspended out over the complete, you know, the open water basin here, but here's what I'm getting at, okay? Is that I think that after turnover is complete, and we're in what we call the classic fall period, there is again, I'm not saying all muskies, I'm saying we have a greater percentage of muskies that are going to relate to areas in your lakes or areas in your flowage that are more concentrated around the deepest water pockets. I don't know what it is necessarily. Well, I do have some ideas on what it is, why fish do this, why these fish congregate in bigger numbers in these deeper water areas. And one of my thoughts is that I think that the larger the water column, to a certain extent, you know, offers you, as you winter in an area, it offers you, you know, more access to perhaps food. There may be something to do with, so again, it could be a food source thing. I think it has a lot to do with a consistency thing. I think the bigger the body of water, the less dramatic the changes will be. That's probably one of the bigger things. You know, if you try to heat a cup of water, it will heat up very quickly. Compared to if you try to heat up a tub of water, it will heat very slowly. I'm not saying that that's the exact science behind this. What I am saying, that's the asterisk, not saying that's the exact science, but what I am saying is that I think that there is something to do with muskies gravitating toward larger, deeper areas because of the consistency factor. What is that consistency factor? I don't know yet. I think it has something to do with it is an instinctive movement because fish naturally want to be in places, as they're cold-blooded, that have less tolerance, less variance in that temperature. I think that's what the bigger water does. Does that mean there's not going to be muskies in this small lake here? Absolutely not. There's definitely plenty of them in here. Do I think some of these fish may migrate? And do fish, are they transient on chains and flowages? Absolutely. Go and read Jordan Weeks' study on the Manitouish chain. It's out there on the World Wide Web. He did an amazing job in his study. He talks about it on some different publications he's on. Muskies are transient critters, so are walleyes. I believe he actually studied walleyes in that study. Or maybe it was muskies. I don't remember right now. But again, what I'm getting at here is I think there's a movement. And I think that movement revolves around muskies relating to hard bottom structures, break lines, and deeper water. That's the big move. We get into the classic fall period. I think you've got more muskies. Again, I'm gonna say this again. Deep water basins, deep. I'm gonna say basin related with depth, greater depth, greater depth. I think you have a relate to hard bottom. Why hard bottom? And relate to bait fish. That's huge, right? Without the food, you have no muskies. Without the food, you have no muskies, okay? So again, during this fall period, we've got muskies in their wintering area. I call this the wintering area because, again, in my northern Wisconsin regions, our northern regions here, when the ice covers the lake, I think these muskies have a tendency to winter and somewhat semi-hibernate in these areas, okay? And so why is it important? Well, that's where I'm focusing my time, at least a lot of it, a majority of my time in the classic fall period, okay? So that's a little bit of an idea of, why I'm spending my time on bigger waters. Is there a trophy potential on bigger waters? Probably, okay? So now, we're gonna talk a little bit about tactics. What's the tactic here? We've got fish that are holding on brake lines, right? Maybe there's some weeds, but mostly, again, maybe we should just, again, if you're new to musky fishing, what is a brake, right? What is a brake line? Well, a brake line here, first of all, and why, I guess we should say, well, why are we relating to hard bottom structures? Well, again, as your weed growth deteriorates, muskies are structure-related fish, whether that structure is food or whether that structure is cribs, rocks, wood, debris, or a brake line. A brake line is structure. A brake line is where you break. You go from shallow, and then you break, and then you go deep. So you've got shallow, okay, break, and then you've got deep. And this is where you want to focus some time, okay? You want to focus some time on these brake lines, okay? So that, if you were to highlight this map, this is like this area here on my map, okay? This is where I'm focusing some time, is between 10 and 15, 10 and 18 feet of water. This is called a brake line. Even if you are without fish cribs and logs and all these types of things, you're still going to have muskies relating to that brake line because it is a distinct change in structure. It offers muskies an ambush point. Muskies, I think we like to think about them as these creatures that are constantly roaming and constantly feeding. Look, that doesn't happen, right? Rarely do muskies expend that much energy. Think of all your predators in the world, by the way. Take, for example, the great cheetah, of the African plains. The cheetah. Does the cheetah run around all the time just looking for gazelles to eat? No, of course not. It sits in ambush. It waits to pick out the weak, the young, the slowest, the sickly, and it waits, and it hides. It hides in ambush. Muskies are very similar. They don't want to expend a lot of energy, and they will sit in areas of transition. What do we mean by areas of transition? Well, do you have bait? This is a cloud of bait that's going from shallow to deep. Do you have bait like Cisco's going from deep to shallow? If they do, they're going to cross through the dead zone there. That's the kill zone. That's where muskies are waiting to eat these things. Do you have fish that are, I think they transition, as your Cisco's and your pelagic baitfish go to spawn in shallow areas. They've got to go through the brake line, and that is where the muskies are hiding. That is where they're sitting, ready to pounce and eat them. So, there's two tactics here as we talk tactics, okay? I think, I hate to do this to my amazing drawing here, but I think I'm going to take a minute here. So, if you're having some food or some soup or you're drinking a beverage, go ahead and take a sip of your beverage here, because I am going to talk about some really cool things here in just a moment, and I'm going to redo our dry erase board. And I could probably edit this so that, this is so you don't see me, but you guys want to see me erase it. You guys want to see me work on the whiteboard here. We're going to talk tactics now. We're going to talk classic fall tactics. Oh yeah, classic fall tactics. And that first tactic we're going to talk about is trolling. Why troll? And we probably need a whole vlog on trolling, guys. I'm not going to be able to cover the entirety of, of trolling, but let's see if we can't draw like a 3D break line, okay, something like this. And here is your shallow water here, and this is, 5 feet, something like that. And we've got, and this is again, so that gives it that 3D concept here, okay? And then you have, here's, let's call this 10, and we'll call this 15 and 20, okay? And then we break, we break, okay? That's supposed to be a K with a big leg, okay? And we break, and we get off into here, we'll call this 40 feet, okay? And we've got our lone muskie here hiding by some debris. Let's say we've got a fish crib here, and we've got a crib here, and we've got some debris here, and boulders and rocks and things, and we've got a big old girl here, big old muskie sitting on that break line, right? Now, here's me and Big Whiskey. Here's me and Conti, or me and Richardson. Here's me and Boot Daddy Plus in our boat here. Now, you could cast a break line. And I cast break lines all the time. We'll talk about this. You can cast break lines with live bait. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here. But right now, we're talking about trolling. First of all, why troll? Hey, it's pretty easy. Well, what trolling does, folks, and what it allows you to do is if you move, now we're going to get into physics here. We have an object moving from left to right. Is we move this way, okay, and we troll a lure, okay? First of all, I guess I should back up. When you're casting, think about it like this. If I have my boat out here in the deep water and we cast in, okay? We cast in, and we bring our lure back. We cast in, we bring our lure back. The lure is in this strike zone for a very small amount of time, especially when you've got any type of lure. If you've got a jig like a tube or a soft plastic lure or anything like that, or if you've got a crankbait like a DepthRaider that I really love fishing in the fall, But again, when you're casting, you have to, just get to you have to get to this understanding, right? That your lure takes, again, the C pattern. It starts up here, it dives, and it comes back up, okay? And you might say, again, this is start and this is finish, okay? Your lure, as it dives, this might be the sweet spot, okay? And the percentage of time here is small, okay? That's it's a small percentage of time that it's in the sweet spot. Is casting effective? Absolutely, but trolling in the late fall period can be deadly, okay? That's one of my favorite tactics, and for this very reason, as we move left to right, and I've got a length of line out here. We'll talk about this in just a second, okay? I can keep my DepthRaider or multiple lures at different depths, and they will stay at this depth for hours. For hours upon hours until I catch a fish or until I snag up and reel in somebody's nasty monofilament line with a crawler harness and all that walleye tackle and boots and anchors and ropes and everything you could snag, okay? The beauty of trolling is that you keep your lure in the strike zone for a very, very prolonged period of time, okay? The keys, okay, is we're not going to go super far in depth on this because I've done some podcasts, I've written some articles, I'll continue to write on this, and I can do a whole vlog on this if you'd like. The keys to effective trolling, first of all, I'm going to put this speed. Okay, your velocity and your direction. Velocity, as we get into science here, because that is speed plus direction. Okay, and direction's key when you're trolling. Okay, we'll talk about that. That's kind of an advanced technique. Speed, okay. We've got line length, and you've also got line diameter. These three things, this is the holy grail of trolling right there. In a very basic sense, okay? I know there's viewers out there that's all you guys and gals do is troll, and you know more about trolling than I do. I'm not going to tell you at all that I know more about trolling than some of you folks out there. I don't, okay? And that's fine. Speed is very important, okay? Speed, you really need to gauge your speed, first of all, on your fishery. A classic question I get asked as a guide all the time as well, Chaz, how fast should I reel this in? And it's not a smart butt answer. It's just saying, I don't know. I have no idea. Aren't you the guide? I don't know. It's a new day. It's a new lake. It's a new this or that. Until you catch a muskie doing whatever particular speed you're going to be doing, you don't really know until you pattern it in for that day. You can have a good hunch, but things change overnight. That's what makes this sport so tough. Generally speaking, on the speed side of things, the cooler the water, the slower your speed. Cold water, slow speeds. You need to pair your speed with the length of line you have out, okay? Shorter lines will run shallower, okay? So short line runs shallow. You can have short lines running shallow, okay? I'm not insinuating that I've got more than my legal length of lines out. In the state of Wisconsin, I'm allowed 3 baits, 3 lines, okay? But shorter lines run shallow, okay? Long lines, you can have a long length of line out with a higher speed that runs very deep, okay? I'm trying to make that look deep, okay? Your line diameter plays a huge part in this as well. The thinner the diameter, the deeper your lure is going to run, okay? There's tons of literature out there. There's books you can buy. There's probably YouTube videos out there that will tell you, the speed with which you should be running your boat with the length of line out and the line diameter for all these different lures out there, okay? It would take me a lot of time to start talking to you about exact depths and things that I'm running with my jointed and straight model DepthRaiders, and it all is very dependent on the situation. And what is that situation, right? Well, let's get to that right now. What's the situation? What is it dependent on? Well, first of all, speed's dependent on the water temperature, but this is what it's dependent on for me, okay? For, these guys. Bait fish, okay? You've got bait fish, okay? I'm just going to draw this in a cloud, okay? You've got a cloud of bait fish holding at, I don't know, you got a clouds of bait fish holding at 15 feet, and you can tell that they're off the bottom. What I try to do, and let's say the bottom, maybe we're over the basin, and let's just say, for example, we're in 30 feet of water, and we've got a cloud of fish sitting at the 15-foot mark, okay? I'm going, part of my ideology here is to run a lure, if you got 3 of them, I'm going to run one right through it. I'm going to run one high, real high, and one maybe a little bit above it, okay? I try not to go below, okay, which is a common problem I think anglers have as they're fishing below the muskies. If your muskies are holding, somewhere around that bait cloud, and you're presenting lures to them that are beneath them, I think you can catch them doing that. I'm sure you can, because we know that in musky fishing, literally everything produces a fish. But again, that's just letting you know that's kind of where I'm thinking, where I'm positioning my lures has to do with where I'm finding bait. Even where I'm seeing muskies either on the 2D sonar or on my electronics. So I'm looking for bait. I'm trying to gauge where I want to position my lures in comparison to bait so that I can catch muskies. Okay, now we're going to talk about one more very important topic here, okay? What's the other big thing we want to know more about when it comes to musky fishing in the classic fall period? And you know what? I'm just going to start all over here real quick, okay? I hope you're enjoying this so far, okay? Now, and we probably should keep that vector out for speed, okay? You can tell I'm a physics teacher because we're talking about vectors. I'm talking about vectors. And that's the beauty of science, is I think science relates so nice to our sport of musky fishing here. So let's see if I can draw that again. We had this, beautiful break line here, and here we go. There we go. That's even better than before, isn't it? Look at that. And here's 5. Let's just call that 10. Here's 15, and then we really drop, okay? We really drop into 25 and beyond, okay? Here's 40 down here, okay? Now, let's talk live bait fishing, okay? First of all, I'm working on some videos for this fall about quick strike rigging. There's a lot of different rigs out there. You've got lift-off rigs, you got traditional rigs. First of all, if you're new to musky fishing, don't use single hook sucker rigs. You probably already know that. And I am not going to be one to harp on you for, just little things. But just so you know, it's been well documented of all these things. Probably the most well documented outside of all this hot water talk. What we do know is that if you put a hook inside the gut of a fish and then you rip it out, it's probably going to do some damage to the fish. So don't use single hook rigs. Use quick strike rigs. If you don't know what a quick strike rig is, Google it and you'll know. Joe Bucher Outdoors and a lot of other great companies sell quick strike rigs, okay? So check them out. But I use quick strike rigs. I use a slip bobber, by the way. I'm not really going to diagram this for you, but I like to use a slip bobber. It makes setting my depths pretty easy. I can quickly adjust it, just like, if you do a lot of crappie fishing or walleye fishing, you're using slip bobbers. I use a slip bobber for my sucker fishing. It's obviously a bigger slip bobber. You can check out the ones I use at JBO in their, I think it's in their miscellaneous tackle section on the website, but you could always shoot me a message and I'll drop the link. Actually, heck, I'll drop the link in the description of the video for this stuff. But really, what I wanted to talk about here, again, as we look at this diagram, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, and this is just my take on it. And does it get more complicated than this? Of course it can, okay? Let's say we've got some fish cribs and we've got some trees and things like that on the break here. It doesn't have to be a break. It could be weeds. Whoops, we lost a muskie. Come here, buddy. All right. So again, if you've got your muskie sitting here by these cribs in 15 foot of water, okay? Here's me and Richardson here. We're out, or me and Concy are out on a hunt here. And generally what I'm doing, there's a lot of people that run different setups for live bait, okay? One of my favorite ways to present live bait, and gosh, I'm already thinking of all these different ways to do this. My general rule of thumb, generally speaking, is if we're in 15, okay, I'll cut it in half, okay? So 14 divided by 2 is 7. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So I call it, 8, and then I give it an extra foot, and I say, look, and the reason I do that is this. I'm going to put mine, so if this is 15 feet, right, and this is the middle zone, okay, I'm going to try to present my sucker somewhat below the middle, okay? Okay, and now that trolling is legal in Wisconsin, you can position fish your boat. You can move forward or backward while having a sucker line down. That's legal now, okay? But my reason for this is I'm going to put 9 foot of line out between the bobber and where my sucker is dangling, is because as I move a little bit with the wind, again, the key here, slow, okay? You want to go slow. I don't want to put my sucker here, okay? Although there's ways to do that. We're not going to get into that right now. But I'm not going to put it down here because it's going to snag, okay? When snag suckers, can they catch a fish right before they snag? Yeah, we've done it. We've all done it before. I want to kind of teeter along, not too high, okay, and not too low. What I will do is I will have another one, not necessarily up in the front of the boat. I will have another one maybe down 3 feet, okay? And this one is for follows. So when I get muskies following into the boat, a lot of times they'll dart off, and sometimes they'll grab this sucker. Sometimes when I'm really live bait fishing and it's too super cold or too cold to cast, something like that, I'll have a third sucker line way, and again, these are usually away from the boat with a bobber here, okay, a slip bobber, and I might have one down 5 feet, I might have one down 10 feet. So I try to give, just like we talked about with trolling, if you're seeing bait, if you're seeing muskies, I try to position my suckers around the food source to best emulate that food source, okay? This could be outside of a weed edge. This could be outside on a break line. I try to vary it. The biggest thing I can tell you with sucker fishing that I found personally is that I try to look to the food source and try to dictate where that is. The biggest thing that I think folks can make a problem with is going too deep, because too deep, you're either going to fish below the muskies, you're going to snag them, or, so I try to go from just middle to below and keep them in a kind of with that baseline depth, okay? One other thing I wanted to talk about, I have this in my notes here, if this gives you just a few tips on live bait fishing, is, when the rod goes off, zzz, you hear that clicking, right? I've found over the years that muskies are pretty darn, when they get something in their mouth, especially late in the year, or you guys or gals out there have ever hooked into a pike or a bass and had a muskie grab it, and they won't let go of it. A lot of us have actually caught muskies doing that because they won't let go of it to the bitter end. Well, when they grab a sucker, they kind of do a very similar thing. They won't let go of it very often. At least, a lot of the waters I fish, when they grab it, they can be kind of sneaky on some days. But a lot of times when they get a hold of it, they want to eat the darn thing. And you can put a little bit of pressure on them. Not a lot, but just a little bit to feel if they're there. I would recommend here, I'm not going to diagram this, but you want to make sure before you go slam the hooks into this thing that the muskie, a lot of times, if you can position your boat, that the muskie's swimming away from you, so you can get a good tight line into the fish. The worst thing is to have slack in your line. You got to rip that hook, and you don't break a rubber band. You don't break that hook out of the snout and cartilage in your sucker, or however you've got it rigged up. You want a tight line. You want a tight line for live bait fishing when you go to set the hook. And the last thing, guys, as I talked about, is we move from our classic fall period into what I call late fall. We'll just finish up our video talking about this, our late season. And I'm just going to call it season because it's really the end of fall. We're moving into winter. It's late season, and I've deemed this, 41, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. During this time of the year, you won't see many people out. During this time of the year, you've got a lot of times ice on the water. This is a time of the season where I am often, I've called it quits because all of my boat launches are iced up, and I'll winterize my E-Tech, and then I'll just go out and fish and winterize it again, because a lot of times you're going to have a thaw for a couple days and allows me a couple extra days to go out and fish. During the late season, this is arguably, and this has been argued with some very smart people, it's arguably, as you get closer and closer to the later part of the season, you've seen Tom Gelb do it. He caught one of the biggest muskies, if not the biggest, to come out of Vilas County in the last 50 years. I believe it was 51 pounds or 50 pounds, 6 ounces, whatever it was, 51 pounds in 2006. Your best shot at catching a record muskie is probably going to come in the latter part of the season. Muskies are gearing up for that semi-hibernative state. They're packing on the fat stores that they're going to hold them through the winter without feeding much as their metabolism drops to nearly zero. Your chances of catching a really, really dense muskie, and yes, fat is more dense than egg mass. Fat is more dense than egg mass. So your chances of catching a really, really heavy muskie are probably going to come in the fall. That's why I fish during this time of the year. It can be tough on the boat, the equipment, but you got to do it. And you have to be safe. That's one of the most important things. I actually have a note on that. Stay safe. And one of the reasons I troll a lot in the fall is because I don't really deal with tranking reels in and reeling lures in, because there's a lot of problems with freezing line guides and all sorts of frozen line on the tip of your rods and stuff like that. So the late season isn't for everybody, but trolling really allows me to spend my time most effectively in the late fall period. So guys, there you have it. That's it. That's part 2 of my muskellunge movement during the fall period. We covered kind of our early fall into our classic fall period, and now we talked just briefly about our late fall period. We tried to give you a little bit of an idea of where my mind is at with trolling and why I troll, and of course with live bait fishing and setting suckers to different depths. I'm sure a lot of you have questions for me. Please put those down in the comments section. We could really, I mean, these vlogs could go on for hours and hours and hours. And if you like this series, if you like what we're talking about, we can do more of these. I hope you found this two-part series to be informational, to be helpful for you, no matter if you're fishing in Canada or Kentucky or Tennessee or Minnesota or Wisconsin or Ohio or Illinois or Indiana or Iowa or Pennsylvania, my Pennsylvania musky clients out there and friends. Doesn't matter where you're fishing. These tactics will be applicable to a lot of different bodies of water. And a funny question, is this, if I draw on your home lake today? Maybe. I'm not sure if I did, but I might have drawn your home body of water, and if I did, all the power to you. That's awesome. Well, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this mini seminar, or I guess you can just call it a seminar on fall musky tactics and movement. There'll be more of these videos. Can't thank you enough for making it to over 4,000 subscribers. Really a proud moment for me. And as I like to say, as always, thanks for watching.